What is good, girls, gays, and they? It is Melody reporting live from your closet, and we are here to discuss week 2 of The Artist Way. Thumbnail. Did I fuck up my bathroom sink before filming this? Perhaps. So week 2 primarily discusses roadblocks or speed bumps that hinder you from being authentic and block you from being creative. Before she gets into the meat and potatoes of what all that means, she does briefly touch on some of what was discussed in week 1, which is negative self-talk and self-doubt and how that leads to us self-sabotaging and how that leads to us staying trapped and complacent rather than pursuing what we want creatively and indulging in that and nourishing ourselves. And she says here, just as a recovering alcoholic must avoid the first drink, the recovering artist must avoid taking the first think. For us, that think is really self-doubt. I don't think this is any good. She says that early in our creative recovery, self-doubt can lure us into self-sabotage. And as I was saying, the best way to combat these things is to lean on affirmations and use those as a way to get us out of that negative mind space. And so she says, do not let your self-doubt turn into self-sabotage. So that being said, we have about 4 roadblocks that she discusses in depth and how that affects us. And then at the very end of this, she has, I think, beautifully written passage that's very poignant about kind of a way to observe life and kind of a philosophy to abide by that I think not only helps you creatively, but also just with your mental health and your emotional well-being. So that all being said, we have about 3 major roadblocks, and the first one is what she calls poisonous playmates. I'll preface all of this by saying a lot of these kind of co-mingle or interconnect with each other. Specifically with the first 2, these can be anybody in any walk of life: spouse, sister, parents, a coworker, a mentor, a teacher, your best friend, and I think it's important to say that people like this aren't necessarily bad people and people who are out to get you and want you to suffer. A lot of the times people can do this unintentionally, and they might even think that they're being helpful or supportive, when in reality it is either hurtful to you or harming you. Maybe it makes you feel insecure or just not encouraged in your creative life, or honestly just in your emotional well-being. Anyways, we begin with poisonous playmates, and essentially these are other people who are blocked creatively, who in turn block your creativity. Whether or not it's intentional, these people who are still blocked creatively will then block you. A couple of reasons as to why this happens is they might feel threatened by seeing you focusing on yourself, recovering, really prioritizing this aspect of your life. They might even feel slightly betrayed maybe because you are now prioritizing yourself and placing boundaries. And in that sense, they feel like maybe they're kind of being distanced or put on a back burner per se, even though that's not the case. So there's some different aspects as to why this can happen. And a big thing that she speaks on here when it comes to the poisonous playmates is that your artist is a child. Your artist is your inner child, and you need a place of security to flourish and nurture that. 2 of our favorite words so far in this series. She emphasizes that because it also intermingles with you safeguarding that aspect of yourself and respecting your boundaries. And again, no matter how well-meaning, you cannot afford... So sorry, these fucking notifications keep going off. My is blowing my fucking phone up. Oh my god. Sorry. That being said, what I liked about this passage in regards to the poisonous playmates is that guilt often is a primary cause as to why we will backtrack or disrespect what we prioritize, or why we will disrespect our boundaries. So she says here, block creatives are easily manipulated by guilt. Our friends, feeling abandoned by our departure from the ranks of the blocked, may unconsciously try to guilt trip us into giving up our newly healthy habits. She continues by saying, we want want to set aside time for our creative work, but we feel as if we should be doing something else instead. But no, we are important and we deserve to be prioritized. So she continues, as Block creatives, we focus not on our responsibilities to ourselves, but on our responsibility to others. We tend to think such behavior makes us good people. It doesn't. It makes us frustrated people. And I think I can kind of tie this back into the point I was making last week, where if your cup is empty, how can you expect to pour into others? If you're neglecting this aspect of your life, if you're not nurturing what you are passionate about, what you find meaning in, it can be hard to then actively do that for others and support them when it's coming from a place of emptiness. I just think that's an important thing to remind yourself of. We can be a better friend, a better lover, a better whatever when we are focusing on being our best selves and cherishing ourselves, and that will reflect and that will overflow into our relationships and other aspects of life. She says, don't let your friends squander your time no matter what. Be gentle but firm, and protect your artist by refusing to show your morning pages to anybody interested, even your friends. So I don't know if I touched on this last week with the morning pages specifically, but you are never to show it to anyone or read it to anyone. It is meant for you and you alone. And she even encouraged you for at least the first week, if not longer, to not even go back and read them, because it could lead to you criticizing yourself or judging yourself for what you've written. And then finally, before we move on to the next roadblock, Julia says, as your recovery progresses, you will come to experience a more comfortable faith in your creator and your creator within. You will discover the joy of practicing your creativity. The process, not the product, will become your focus. Your own healing is the greatest message of hope for others. It is so important to actually just enjoy the creating, to enjoy the experimenting, to enjoy just involving yourself in that moment. If we are so hung up and focused on the product and how perfect it is, or what people are going to think of it, or if it's going to do well, we end up sucking the joy out of what's most important, which is the actual creation itself, not what it results in. So I think that's really important and something that most of us have to continually remind ourselves to do. So on to the next one is what she calls crazy makers. Now I will say I do not think that term has aged well. I think it can be a little ableist. I'm just going to refer to them as people. They are toxic, manipulative, they can be abusive. These could be people you really, really love and have really close relationships with. These aren't always just stranger people that you hate. This can be anyone in your life. Mostly what I got out of this is that a lot of this is codependency. She does go into pretty extensive detail about these people in different aspects of them, their characteristics, their attributes, examples of what they might say or do to you. She mentions that right in the nuclear family, there's a reason we use that word, a resident of this type of person may often be found pitting family member against family member, undercutting anyone's agenda but his or own. One of her examples of this is a daughter has final exam before she graduates for college, and so she's studying extra hard, and the mom knows this and knows that this is important for her and she wants to focus on it, but instead of respecting that, the mother comes and, just throw some wild out of left field shit at her. Do you know what the neighbors are saying about you? So really finding anything to distract you, to minimize what you're doing and put you in a stressful mindset, steal your time so that you then are not prioritizing your needs and wants, with whatever is going on. For instance, in this case, her exam. Number 1, these people break deals and destroy schedules. She says they show up 2 days early for your wedding and expect to be waited on hand and foot. They rent a vacation cabin, larger and more expensive than what was agreed upon, and then they expect you to foot the bill. That's fucked up. 2, these people expect special treatment. So essentially, they will twist the situation or make an excuse to victimize themselves. Therefore, they are not the villain, and therefore they're let off the hook. She has an example of this person is too upset to drive right after he has vented enormous verbal abuse on the heads of those around. I am afraid daddy will have a heart attack, the victim starts thinking, instead of, how do I get this monster out of my house? 3, these people will discount your reality. You might think, oh, well, gaslighting. I wouldn't necessarily equate this to gaslighting. What more so she's saying is that even if they know your boundaries and you've communicated your boundaries, they will still violate those and they will still insert themselves into your life regardless of what you've... Hello, Squiggles. Is there something you'd like to say? So they will essentially disrespect your boundaries, but kind of try to play it off and minimize the impact that it has on you as to not, seem like they're doing real harm or anything like that. And so her example is, let's say you have a job interview really early in the morning and you want to go to sleep early and be, prepared and ready for it. Even though they'll know that, and you may have even communicated to them that you won't be available, they'll still call you at like 1 a.m. and say, I know you asked me not to call at this time, but... And then they'll just start, immediately just piling shit onto you. That's something that we can probably tend to minimize when people do that to us. It's not really a big deal, or it's just kind of like a one-off thing. Number 4 is that these people will spend your time and money. So they will basically just take advantage of your generosity. And sorry to my mom, I know that I've done this in the past, but I'm grown now and realize the error of my ways. Okay. But one of her examples is, let's say they borrow your car. 1, they return it later than they said that they would. Secondly, they return it without any gas. Something that to me translate as a little bit of entitlement and ungratefulness. Basically, like, your standards are lower because you're my family member or friend. So like, if I don't do this, or if I maybe forget that, it's going to be okay because we have a greater understanding. No matter who it is, if they let you borrow the car with a full gas tank and you agreed that you would bring it back on this day, then you need to bring it back on that day, and you need to bring it back with the full fucking tank of gas. It is what it is. 5, these people triangulate those they deal with. So because these people thrive on energy, they set people against one another in order to maintain their own power position dead center. So essentially, in my eyes, people who really thrive off of gossip, who thrive off of drama in such a way that covertly insult you, maybe. So her example is, so-and-so was telling me you didn't get to work on time today. They may relay to you. You obligingly get mad at so-and-so and miss the fact that this person has used hearsay to set you off kilter emotionally. The next one, these people are expert blamers. And I think this kind of goes without saying. Basically, these are people who, like, no matter what the situation, no matter what they did, it's never their fault. It's either an outside source, another person, your fault. It's never their fault. Example is, let's say I let my friend borrow my car. I know that the one tire in it has been leaking. I knew that I needed to put air in it, but I was like, I'm lazy. I don't feel like doing it. Whatever. It's not a big deal, right? I let my friend borrow the car knowing that the friend then ends up calling or texting me saying, hey, I was driving the car, the tire popped. What a toxic person would do is say, oh, it's your fault because you decided to drive my car. If you weren't driving my car, my tire wouldn't have popped. When in reality, the tire was going to pop regardless, and it's because I neglected it and I didn't take care of my responsibilities. So moving on, we have number 7. These people create dramas, but seldom where they belong. And in summation, in my eyes, this is kind of like these people have like fucking main character syndrome, and no matter what's happening, they somehow just find a way to become the main character and like insert themselves into your fucking life. And they might even like project things onto you that aren't even true. Her main takeaway here is that because they're often block creatives themselves, they're afraid to effectively tap into their own creativity. They are loath to allow the same creativity in others. It makes them jealous, threatened, in turn causes them to act out dramatically at your expense. One of her examples is, let's say your husband just got out of surgery from the hospital and you're on your way home after visiting him. Your friend or whoever will call you up and start talking about like a lover or an ex and be like, I just don't know if they really love me or this, that, and the third, with complete disregard to your situation, what you're going through, and how you're feeling. 8 is that these people hate schedules except their own. And essentially, she says that this can be a primary tool for abuse from these people. And I think this kind of goes hand in hand with the discounting your reality point, because her main example here is, I stayed up until 3 last night. I can't drive the kids to school, they'll say, and they will spring this responsibility onto you the morning of, even though you told them that you have to leave early that day because you have a business meeting with your boss. They'll be irresponsible, or they'll set themselves up for failure, and then because they did that, the responsibility is then placed on you to fix that problem that they caused. Number 9, these people hate order. Chaos serves their purposes. And essentially, the point that she's making here is that you might establish a safe space for yourself, or maybe a certain place in the house, or whatever it might be, to indulge in your creative endeavors, to just give yourself a space to create and do what you want. Essentially, they'll find a way to infiltrate that space and to slowly take it over, or try to steal it from you, or maybe even like punish you because because how dare you think that you have the right to prioritize this and have your own space and I don't, you know? One could even say maybe it's a little bit of jealousy as well. You're in the wrong if you get upset about it or you call them out on it. And then last but not least, number 10, these people deny that they are the toxic ones, that they are the troublemakers, that they are the manipulators. She says they go for the jugular. I am not what's making you crazy, they'll say when you point out a broken promise or a piece of sabotage. Quote, it's just that we have such a rotten sex life, end quote. Here, they're not necessarily blaming you or somebody else for what's going on, but it's still not their fault or their problem. So they're gonna find an excuse or a way to rationalize the situation so that they still get off without any type of consequence. And so the way that she wraps up this entire thing is going back to my first point, where a lot of this is more so just codependency. The thing with codependent relationships is that we place a lot of blame on the other person, you know, oh, like they're exploiting us, they're making us feel this way, you know. We have this kind of inherent want to try and fix them or solve their problems or just kind of figure out why they are this way. But she makes a great point of, as much as you are being exploited by them, you too are using that person to block your creative flow. This person is almost kind of an excuse or a way out of prioritizing your own needs, prioritizing your own wants. And she says, as block creatives, we are willing to go to almost any lengths to remain blocked. As frightening and abusive as life with a person is, we find it far less threatening than the challenge of a creative life of our own. Familiar is comfortable, change is scary, and all that being said, we use this fear as an excuse. And then she ends this by saying, the next time you catch yourself saying or thinking, he, she, they is driving me crazy, ask yourself what creative work you are trying to block by your involvement. The final major roadblock we have is skepticism, and she calls this secret doubt. With skepticism, it causes us to question our accomplishments or maybe even dismiss them. We'll demean opportunities or any attempts to achieve goals out of fear that they might actually end up working out for us. We'll often question opportunities given to us, help given to us, gifts given to us, because we might think we're not worthy of it. We might think there's some type of ulterior motive, or there might even be guilt surrounding it where we feel like we then are in debt to that person, and so we should just automatically reject it, because if we do that, then we'll owe somebody something. We can't just accept it at face value and accept something nice. There always has to be a catch to it. There's this type of war and conflict of our self-worth there. It's okay to just accept a gift, and yes, you deserve it, and it's okay for people to do nice things to you just because they want to, and because there doesn't need to be any other reason. You don't have to question it. You can just accept it. And I think a lot of this also ties into imposter syndrome. So some of the things that she says is that when we do have these skeptic thoughts, when we're experiencing these cases of doubt, that it's not about just ignoring it or being like, oh no. We need to kind of just stop what we're doing, accept that, and explore why we're feeling that way, and explore what's happening that's causing us to react like this. So, you know, kind of sitting in your feelings and actually feeling them rather than just numbing them or getting rid of them or what have you. And Sayer will even ruin our self-sabotage, our opportunities, our gifts given to us, because again, we need a reason as to why we should stay complacent and stay safe in our little bubble instead of giving ourselves a chance to actually, you know, take the leap, and the net will appear, y'all. Okay. She kind of says how we have a hard time accepting that so many good things could happen to us. And it kind of makes me think of when you're watching a movie and all these good things are happening to this character, you know, in the back of your head, you're like, okay, things are just going too well. Something bad is about to happen. Something traumatic's about to happen. The climax is about to climb. You know what I'm saying? So I think often in our life, we can end up feeling that way. We're like, things have been going a little too well. Okay, what's going on? Just drop it on me, you know? She uses this metaphor of your mind being a room, and I really liked it, so I'm just gonna read this. I like to think of the mind as a room. In that room, we keep all of our usual ideas about life, God, what's possible and what's not. The room has a door. The door is ever so slightly ajar, and outside we can see a great deal of dazzling light. Out there in the dazzling light are a lot of new ideas that we consider too far out for us, and so we keep them out there. The ideas we are comfortable with are in the room with us. The other ideas are out, and we keep them out. And she says, in creative recovery, it is not necessary that we change any of our beliefs. It is necessary that we examine them. And she says, creative recovery is an exercise in open-mindedness. I have tried to record this part of the video, I don't know how many times, and I'm honestly, I just don't really give a fuck anymore. But I'm going to try again because I've already done so much, and it's taken me easily almost 3 hours to record this shit because it just won't fucking save. It just keeps saving as a corrupted file. I'm gonna like lose my fucking mind. So, the last talking point of this book is entitled Attention. Julia says, very often, a creative block manifests itself as an addiction to fantasy. Rather than working or living the now, we spin our wheels and indulge in daydreams of could have, would have, should have. One of the greatest misconceptions about the artistic life is that it entails great swaths of aimlessness. The truth is that a creative life involves great swaths of attention. Attention is a way to connect and to survive. She then goes into brief details about her relationship with her grandmother and how her grandmother wrote her daily letters that were kind of just streams of consciousness and observations. She touches on how her grandfather, in what I'm coming to understand, was probably an alcoholic and addicted to gambling. And so she says here in this passage, quoting her mother, I don't know how she stands it, my mother would say, furious with my grandfather for some new misadventure. She meant she didn't know why. The truth is, we all knew how she stood it. She stood it by standing knee deep in the flow of life and paying close attention. Grandmother was gone before I learned the lesson her letters were teaching. Survival lies in sanity. Insanity lies in paying attention. My grandmother knew what a painful life had taught her. Success or failure, the truth of a life really has little to do with its quality. Quality of life is in proportion always to the capacity for delight. The capacity for delight is the gift of paying attention. Furthermore, she says, the reward for attention is always healing. And this could be anything, a lost lover, a sickly child, a shattered dream. But what is healed, finally, is the pain that underlies all pain. The pain that we are all unutterably alone. More than anything else, attention is an act of connection. She then goes into an anecdote of her own life and how she was dealing with a divorce. And she says that pain had become something more valuable, experience. Writing about attention, I see that I have written a good deal about pain. There is no coincidence. It may be different for others, but pain is what it took me to pay attention. I have learned to pay attention to right now. In the exact now, we are all always all right. Realizing this, I began to notice that each moment was not without its beauty. I kind of liked this little example of what that kind of thinking entails. She says, the night my mother died, I got the call, took my sweater, and set out up the hill behind my house. A great snowy moon was rising behind the palm trees. Later that night, it floated above my garden, washing the cactus silver. When I think now about my mother's death, I remember that snowy moon. She ends it by saying, the poet William Meredith has observed that the worst that can be said of a man is that he did not pay attention. So my takeaway here is, rather than dwelling on all the traumas and pain and misfortune of our past, rather than dwelling on the anxieties, the what ifs, the unknowns of the future, we need to learn to be still and present and in the moment and recognize the things around us that give us happiness, that give us joy, the beauty in the small moments and just everyday things that occur. And that despite what we may be going through or what happened yesterday or what will happen tomorrow, what we can guarantee is what is happening to us right now. And there's always something that can bring us a smile or joy or someone we can think about that makes us happy or something that we could do that eases that heaviness that we feel. And I think that's really something important to take into consideration. And I know like for a lot of people when they're in mourning or when they're experiencing grief because of loss, sometimes there's this guilt that surrounds us where we feel like we don't deserve happiness or to smile or to laugh, or if we don't kind of just engulf ourselves in that sadness, that we're somehow doing a disservice disservice to that loss that we've experienced, when the reality is that we still deserve joy and we still deserve to experience joy despite the loss, despite the pain. Most of the time, both is occurring all at once, and that's okay. And that's what life is. And I do think specifically in the creative aspect, there's so much to feel inspired by and to recognize when you are paying attention. One thing I really like to do is look up at the sky and kind of stargaze. I just think it's very beautiful, and I think it kind of puts into perspective how small you really are. And I don't mean that as an insignificant, but in the aspect that there's so much life happening. There's so many people around you who are also experiencing the same thing, who know what it feels like to feel what you do, to go through what you have gone through, and to just kind of stop. And as cliche and corny as it is, like, you know, it's kind of like the phrase, you got to stop and smell the roses, you know? It's okay to just take a step back and appreciate what is. And I think that's a really nice philosophy to live by. Not to say that it's going to always be easy to do that, or things won't happen that maybe distract you, but to try and remind yourself of that and to be grounded and in the moment, I think gives you so much more appreciation and wisdom and the ability to connect. Because if you're too caught up in this or that or what happened or what didn't happen, sometimes it's hard to even really focus on the person in front of you and listen and hear them and really comprehend what's happening. So I thought that was a really, really nice passage, and definitely something that resonated with me and I really enjoyed. Okay, I do apologize if some of what I went through seemed rather rushed through. I really did intend to discuss in detail a lot of what she talked about because I thought it was important, but I am just very tired and frustrated after having to re-record and re-record and re-record. But alas, with all that being said, we move on to the tasks and assignments for week 2. Of course, as always, you go on your weekly artist date and you do your morning pages every single day. The tasks this week were different but interesting. A lot of it was more introspection at people in your life, how they affect you, who you feel safe with, what you need to protect, and I'll briefly touch on some of them. Well, she had you reread your affirmations and kind of just focus on those and spend some quiet time in that. She had you reread the basic principles that are from chapter 1 and be mindful of any negative self-talk that may come up while you read that. One of the other assignments was to list 5 major activities and how much time you spend in each one. And basically the goal of this is to see kind of what you're prioritizing and see if there's any places in your life that you're neglecting. From that, there was an activity where you draw a circle and you put into a visual who's allowing you to have your safe space and who kind of supports and encourages that. And then on the outside of that circle was people who are stealing that from you, or people who you are drawn to prioritizing and dismissing your own needs. Another one was listing 20 things you enjoy and reflecting on if you've allowed yourself to enjoy them recently. And she recommends, you can make these artist dates. That was really easy for me. I mean, I listed like fucking 30 things. And I think it's a good idea, like she said, that you could use them for artist dates. So, and then on top of that task, which I thought was a good point, and I think I've been doing, is she said to take 2 of your favorite things and try to make those, a goal that week. And she says sometimes you might not really have that much time, so let's say you like thrifting. It's better to go thrifting for 15 minutes and experience that and give yourself that joy rather than to just completely negate that because, I just don't have the time, and just not do it at all. So don't overcomplicate it. Don't feel like you need to block off a whole 8 hours to do a task. If all you have is the 15 minutes, then you use that 15 minutes and you do what it is that brings you joy. And I thought that was a really good point because I do think I tend to overthink or feel like if I don't have like 2 hours to do this, then I just won't do it. It's just like, it's not worth it, but it is no matter if you only have 10 minutes or 2 hours, so I thought that was a good point. Continuing, another task was rereading some affirmations and then repeating those to yourself during your morning pages. Other task was returning to the imaginary 5 lives and what you would do if you were living those, and if you can give yourself a chance to actually experience that. Another task was what she called life pie. So you draw a circle, you split it into 6 sections, one for spirituality, one for play, one work, friends, and then one is romance/adventure. And then you put a dot with how fulfilled you feel in each category. And then from there, you're kind of meant to reflect on that and see what areas of that, circle you could improve upon. And then the last assignment was split into 3 parts. It was called 10 Tiny Changes, and this is list 10 changes you'd like to make for yourself. From there, you're supposed to select at least one of the items, usually the smaller of them, and see if you can't achieve it for that week. I mean, she says, like, go ahead and do that shit, bitch. But, we have to give ourselves grace. So, those were the assignments. I will say, in retrospect, I was finding it a little bit more difficult to kind of stay on task and focused. I missed like 1.5 of the morning pages. I was at my friend's house over the weekend, so it was harder to prioritize that, even though Julia does say, even if that's the case, you still need to find a way to prioritize it. So, I recognize that. But I just did notice that the motivation was there. Or sometimes I would get distracted and forget to do my morning pages, so then I ended up doing them at 12. But like, I was like, well, it's better to do them too late than just not do them. She did ask if you were surprised by anything you wrote, and I don't necessarily feel surprised. I feel like I've still been kind of using them as more of just an outlet and a way to recap the events from the day before, or like if I had a weird dream. I know in some of them I've just spent almost like all the 3 pages just talking about the dream I had. But I will say that overall I do think I notice less messiness in my headspace, where I feel maybe more at ease throughout the week because I've kind of gotten a lot of that out in the morning pages. My artist date, again, this one was hard for me because I do feel like I've been overcomplicating this. Like I feel like I need to do some, grandiose task or what have you to actually like feel like I've accomplished the artist date. And that's not really the case. It can be something as simple as just sitting down and focusing and watching a movie with a glass of wine that I've always wanted to see. I think I've been like making it too complicated. I did buy a coloring book and I have my Prismacolor colored pencils, so I think for week 3 that will be my artist date. However, I will say I think my artist date really was this kind of squirrel interaction I had. And in retrospect, I think this is actually this is a good example of paying attention and finding beauty and connection in the here and now. But essentially I had gone to the gym and I noticed this dead squirrel. I was like, it was a little questionable to me because I didn't see guts spread out or a lot of blood. So I was almost kind of worried that, some freakos had just killed it for fun, because you know how motherfuckers are. But I noticed this and felt sorry for it, but c'est la vie. I then noticed a baby squirrel in the corner of this parking garage. Immediately, I just felt so sad for that little squirrel because I knew that the dead squirrel was its mother. I knew that it had been orphaned. I just knew that it was waiting for its mother to wake up, and the mother was not going to wake up. And I just felt so much sympathy and just sadness for this small animal. And I tried kind of getting close to it and saying hi, but it looked really afraid. So I was like, let me just go do my workout. Maybe it'll be there when I come back. So I come back, and at first I don't see the baby squirrel, but then I see it come back out. So I kind of get on my knees on this dirty ass parking garage floor. And, I'm kind of beckoning to it hey, I'm not going to hurt you. And eventually it comes really close to me and sniffing me, and it's doing these little chirp noises. And it does still look wary and afraid, but comfortable enough to come close to me. I was just I didn't have any food or anything for it. I didn't have anything to, give it shelter. And I just was like, oh my God, this is breaking my heart seeing this fucking squirrel. So fast forward, I was like, okay, I'm going to go to the gym tomorrow and I'm going to have food so I can give this squirrel. And maybe I could coax it to get into a box and I could release it into the wild. I come back the next day, and yes, the squirrel is still there. I, at this point, have named it Chirp. Kind of say hi to her and do this. And then when I come back out, I didn't see it at first, so I was like, oh, maybe it doesn't want to come out. But then as I'm walking to my car, I swear to God, it follows me to my vehicle. So heartwarming. And I was like, oh my gosh, this poor animal. And so I'm talking to it and I'm trying to coax it over to me, and it gets close. It even ends up crawling in between my legs and stuff, but it wouldn't let me touch it. It was still kind of I don't think so. At some point it was hiding underneath my car, and I was like, oh my God, it's finding shelter. But I just didn't know know what to do. It wasn't responding to the food I had. Like, it would kind of sniff it, but then it was like, fuck that. And I had a box, clearly was not interested in the cardboard box. So I was like, well, like, I don't know what else to do. So I went in my car and I sat there with the door open. Chirp comes up right next to the door and almost looks like it wants to, jump into my car. And I was like, oh my God. It was really tugging on me heartstrings, and it was just so cute, and I just desperately wanted to save this animal and give it a good squirrel life. Unfortunately, I have not seen it since that day, but I mean, I had to have spent probably almost an hour with the squirrel, just connecting with it and paying attention to it. And I mean, I think it was actually like a really special moment, and I don't know, I hope Chirp's doing okay, and I hope Chirp's out there eating nuts and talking to other squirrels and stuff. But I don't know, I feel like that was kind of my artist date, even though it was unintentional. I'll share one other task before I end this. I thought like the 5 careers would be kind of funny. So I'm actually going to share all 10 that I've written down so far. So 1 is an astronomer, 2, a Broadway star, 3, therapist, 4, a journalist, which is actually one of the first careers I was considering when I was still attending college, was journalism. 5, a DJ. My others were an interior designer. I love playing The Sims, and I love building in The Sims, and I think I make some pretty fucking good designs, and I was like, you know what, like, it'd actually be kind of fun to do that in real life. Graphic artist. Again, this is actually something I used to do for hours and hours on end in middle school up into high school. I actually still have my DeviantArt pages up where you could find them if you wanted to. So I would make like profile picture for people. If you were one of those people who were on forums back in the day, especially fan forums for artists, I would make what they call sets. So you would have like a signature kind of graphic art design, and then you're like matching avatar. So I would make those for people. I even entered contests. We would call them blends or collages. And I did like a lot of photo manipulation, but not like to alter appearances, but to make wallpapers for your laptop or whatever. Another one is just a producer. So just producing beats and instrumentals for people. Another one is director. And specifically, I'd like to be the creative director and director for music videos. And then the next one would be a streamer. And I've dabbled in streaming, but I didn't really ever commit to it, but I did enjoy it. And I mean, that would be something I think would be fun to do again, and I still consider maybe getting back into it eventually. So those are them. I will say with the assignments this week, did most of them, at least when it comes to the writing aspect. There was a lot that I didn't actually accomplish, like the 10 tiny changes. The one I marked and said I was going to complete, I didn't do it, which kind of sucked because like I actually really was looking forward to it. But I'm going to try, and I'm going to find a week in the future, and I'm going to accomplish it. So there's that. The 20 things that I enjoy, we were supposed to take one of them and do one of them. Again, I mean, I will say like, I did do them, but I didn't intentionally actually look at the list and be like, okay, this one right here, I'm doing it for like 2 hours this week. I like video games, so I mean, I play like an hour of Fortnite, but it wasn't like I intentionally made a decision, so I don't know that I really followed through with that either. But again, I'm going to use that list for artist dates in the future. I mean, overall, I feel pretty good. I did engage with them, but I do wish I would have actually been able to physically carry out some of the tasks, but fuck it. Finally, she asked about any issues this week. When I was making the first video for this series, I actually had lost almost 2 hours of progress when I was editing the video because the program crashed, and that was really, really discouraging, and I almost was like, fuck it, I'm not even gonna do that shit. Fuck it, I'm not doing the fucking videos at all. But then I was like, you know what, no, I'm just gonna take the L, and I'm gonna start from where I left off, and I did it, and I'm glad I did. But oh my god, and I kind of feel that way right now with the amount of times I've had to fucking re-record shit. But I would say that's really the only issue I feel like I personally went through that was affecting me. I mean, I guess the issue of not completing some of the tasks. One thing that was really cool that happened to me that made me think about not being skeptical of opportunities or good things was I did an open verse for the song New Girl by Jalen Josie, and she commented, liked, and she reposted it, and I thought that was really cool. I felt finally recognized, and like I felt acknowledged for creating, and that was a really cool experience, and I'm very grateful. Like, that's not something that usually happens when I do those. I did find myself looking for an excuse not to be proud of that or be happy about it, because I was like, oh, well, she reposted, that's awesome, but then I look and like no one's engaging with the repost, so I'm like, oh, well, it didn't actually fucking do it. But it's like, why am I looking for other reasons to like not be happy about something? Like, why am I not just letting myself be happy that this happened? You know what I'm saying? So I did recognize that and try to kind of like actually shut that down and combat that. So I think that was kind of a good thing. So I guess that was an issue, but I feel like I overcame it. So that was week 2. I'm enjoying week 3. You know, I will report back and we'll see how I feel next week, y'all. Thanks for tuning in. And you know something? Comment, like, subscribe, share that bitch. Melody Danae Andrews on all streaming platforms. Peace out, y'all.